We are Ophea. We'll talk a little bit about our organization, who we are, and what we do. One thing that I wanted to note in building on what Darda was saying this morning, Ophea is supporting the OPC education pillar. So we'll talk more about the work we do in this session and how we've been working with the OPC on our resources and supports that we've been doing over the past few years. Okay. My name's Andrea Haefele. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a teacher in the York Region District School Board, currently on secondment here at Ophea as health and physical education curriculum. I've been part of many regional and also provincial initiatives supporting health and physical education, healthy schools, and also the daily physical activity provincial policy here in Ontario. I'm also a strong advocate for people with disabilities. I share identities with my daughter, who is disabled. I'm also a caregiver for her. And through her, I've had the pleasure of speaking at many professional learning networks, such as Holland Bloorview, Kids Rehabilitation Hospital, Sick Kids, Jumpstart Charity. So very super excited to share the work we're doing here at Ophea and being able to support what you are doing in your own communities and organizations.
Everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a projects leader with Ophea. I've been with Ophea since 2020 in a few different roles. My background is in health and physical education, as well as public health and health promotion. I've had the privilege over the past 2 years of working with my colleague Andrea in collaboration with the OPC of leading our inclusive physical education projects that Andrea and I are going to be chatting about today.
Okay. Here we go. So Ophea is the Ontario Physical Health Education Association. We are a nonprofit organization supporting the subject area of health and phys ed, elementary and secondary level at a provincial level. We're a nonprofit organization providing essential tools, resources, supports, and professional learning opportunities for educators and also organizations such as yours. I'm not going to go through all the nuggets on the slide, but if you look at the icons on the bottom, from the provincial perspective, regional perspective, school perspective, and classroom, these are the areas that we support from a curricular lens. And we're also doing a lot of work with inclusion, supporting communities, school communities, and beyond in the work for physical activity, specifically supporting students and also participants with disabilities. We're going to start off with a land acknowledgement. Today, this is our land acknowledgement for our organization. But for myself, I want to personalize that. I would like to acknowledge the land on which I live, work, and play on. This is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe nations, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I actually want to personalize this and anchor this to an experience that I had. A few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of representing Ophea at the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians Health and Wellness Conference out in Leamington, Ontario. There was a particular speaker at this conference that spoke on Indigenous astronomy as told by the Haudenosaunee. And this speaker, she was talking a lot about how astronomy is connected to health and well-being and how her communities and school communities use astronomy to guide their health and wellness. I'm not going to go into detail what she talked about, but I did connect with her after her session, and we started talking about our families and the work that she's doing to support students in her school communities. And then she asked about my family, and we started to get to know each other, and she asked about my daughter. And I said, oh, my daughter, Bella, she's 14 years old, she's disabled. And she turned and she smiled at me, and she said, what is her gift? And that caught me off guard because I was like, wow, I usually go out to conferences like this, out in the community with my guard on, and I'm ready to fight for whatever our family needs, ensure that we advocate for whatever she needs in whatever community setting she's in. And then I was like, wow, out of 14 years of her life, she was the first person who asked me, what is her gift? And I couldn't even answer her on the spot. And it made me think, wow, if educators such as herself go into spaces like we do today with that asset-based lens, that these kids, these children and youth have gifts to add to our community, that would be so much more enriching, you know? So I just wanted to share that personal story to anchor our conversation, because this particular resource that we're going to be talking more about really is close to my heart because my passion is in disability, but also in supporting health and well-being. So it's really nice to have this opportunity to share what we've been doing at Ophea with your organizations. Okay, slide.
Alrighty, so great. I'm going to go over our agenda really quickly for what Andrea and I will be kind of chatting about today. So in a minute, Andrea is going to lead us through a little minds-on activity. It's going to get us thinking about inclusive physical activity and inclusive physical education, inclusive physical spaces. I'm then going to provide a brief overview of our project, our presentation, and what we're going to be sharing today. And then we're going to dive right into our projects that we've been working on with the OPC, starting first with our project that resulted in our disability-centered movement resource, and then moving on to our second project with the OPC, which is our Connecting the Dots OPC Legacy project. Andrea is then going to kind of finish us off by chatting a bit about what's next at Ophea, what are we currently doing, what are we doing moving forward, and then if we have time, anyone who has questions, we can have some Q&A time or have a chat about anything that anyone wants to bring up. So I will pass it over to Andrea for our little activity.
Okay, we're gonna get up. At the back of the room, we set up a bunch of chart papers and we put, okay, move to the next slide. We put a minds on question on the chart paper. So in the education world, we say minds on activity. I wanna get to know more about the communities you serve, what your organization does. Our minds on activity anchors on all these pictures I took from my own phys ed program, indoor and outdoor, along with some educators that work for us here at Ophea. Our question to you, what does inclusive physical activity look, sound, and feel like? Alex is going to scroll through the photos. I want us all to move to the back of the room and jot down. We're going to do a little bit of a mind map. It could be through pictures and words. Through these pictures and words, just share. What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? And share with us, what do you think inclusive physical activity looks, sounds, and feels like? Cool.
So there's some markers and chart papers at the back, whatever comes to mind. I'm going to scroll through some pictures for you to take inspiration or what have you experienced.
Okay, do it.
Sorry, did you share?
Oh, that's one.
Yeah,
they're all the same.
Yeah.
Do you have any teachers in the room?
Yeah.
Elementary, secondary?
I'm not teaching right now. I work for Space Care.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, I know your program very well.
Yeah.
We could see what's on the. It should sound like it's great for me. It should be like cluster.
We'll do that.
Do you want some of the questions?
Be right back.
Yeah.
No, but I don't know if I can. I'm not sure. Activities, everyone participate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting confused.
Yeah. So we just compiled a bunch of pictures. This was back in the day, 2 years ago when I was in the classroom delivering. I was a Rotary Health and Phys Ed teacher. My school community was comprised about 600 to 700 students. Mostly our school is designated as a performance plus school in York Region, and that means we're bracketed as a school that was categorized as lower income. So many immigrant families, Asian, South Asian, majority of them have no access to physical activity outside of school. So yeah, we're hoping that these pictures can prompt with you some ideas of what inclusive physical activity can look, sound, and feel like.
There's a God somewhere and he's laughing and I shuffle my slippery toes to the kitchen, still low to the ground, but high on the
Fun is like that.
Sit down.
That was fun. Fun was fun. So like, yeah, people are like having fun, so they're like.
waking up, stretch my body and exfoliate. Must be something I did yesterday.
Yeah. It took so long to collect all this equipment. Yeah, a lot of money, but I'm very fortunate to have access to administrators who believe in it. We were able to put a lot of the school budget into it.
You want to take 5?
Yeah.
I think we have a.
Think about even the spaces, the physical space. What could an inclusive physical space look like that fosters physical activity? Think about the indoor space, outdoor space. Think about different, oh yeah, that's a good one. Different areas in the school. Love that one. Motivation to continue to this. Right? What's next? What happens after grade 9?
Look it out. Call the sex.
Participation.
Yeah, healthy.
Right time, right place, right
Yeah.
entity.
Yeah, and there's the choice to compete and not compete, right?
Bad dreams.
What party today?
Cool. When you think back, what was the like when you were in school, right? Right? Imagine a kid walking in, yeah, while everyone watching.
Yes, you get this high up.
Yeah.
You're
Right?
learning.
Yeah,
Feel like it
and it's interesting, like that is allowed in that subject area, right? And surprisingly, why are some classrooms still doing that? You know? Yeah. Yeah.
Touch it out.
Very hardcore around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we chatted before.
Creation.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
she's with that.
Yeah.
You know your stuff.
No.
Do. Even think about inter-school, like competition. What does inclusive physical activity look like in that context? These pictures over here are from my integrated class. So we have students with disabilities integrated into
Really.
learning. Here's their age.
Kids have to make that decision, do you know what I mean? So making sure that the activities aren't being, so like they look like they're sitting for the best one. Yeah. Yeah. And then like angles of joint, right? But they're being shoved in there and strapped in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Based on like. 2 more minutes?
Yeah, it's a different way to like.
So that, because I know that there's probably a lot of anxiety for those kids who are like. And not even just for kids that have different abilities, but
Still there when I'm done with this.
maybe kids more.
I guarantee that.
So
Where are you right now?
I'm in the.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
that?
like-
Yeah. Rolling.
Oh,
Three eyes.
Didn't say that, just like-
elementary? Yeah.
Come back to it.
Yeah. You guaranteed it.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm contemplating moving to secondary.
Do it.
But 1 more minute. Equipment. Equipment to communicate, equipment to share your learning. How are students given choice on how to demonstrate their learning?
Yeah, laughter happens. Oh, I love all these words.
Okay, can you finish up what you're doing? We'll take up the posters back to the front. Student choice here.
I think also for.
Hey there if you wanna. Maybe using music, but then also vibrations from music so that people can understand rhythm and things like that. Yeah, so including different types, because then people can learn depending on whatever their abilities are. So if they're hearing impaired, but being able to do it in a feel that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right? And it helps with rhythm of activity. What you're doing. I want to make sure that they can see. I know. I knew it was gonna disconnect. I'm so sorry.
Gymnasium base itself. Very exactly. Like our students in the community class in September, if they're new to our school, they will avoid everything to walk to the gym. So usually the community class teacher walking to the gym in the program itself, just to teach them that, hey, this is a safe space. We're gonna, yeah. But then, my daughter loves it. She loves it. She loves the loud voices and the echoes.
I don't know that. It's complicated at first.
Okay, I'm gonna take this up. Find your seat. Thank you. Yeah, Alex, we're gonna take the sheet back. Thank you.
Yeah, I know, it's not.
I get it.
I'm Megan.
That's like, thank you.
I want that.
I don't know. I'm giant.
Put them up here.
Usually I'm the one.
I want to quickly summarize. I love what I see. Love what I hear. It's really interesting that everyone in this room, although we come from different spaces, thank you, that a lot of the common words and things that we were saying should be happening across all subjects, right? Imagine if all subjects had this. Different access points to access the curriculum, use of different equipment. You were saying, do you want to share what you were saying? I loved what you were saying. Sorry, while you were mid. I'll share. You were talking about how different students learn in different ways. And there were some students who really have the sensory need or needs the sensory input from vibrations and being able to deliver the content in a different way so that they could actually access the curriculum. So when I put my health and phys ed hat on, sometimes the gymnasium space can be very scary for our students. The open space, the bright light, the echoes. And when we think about safety, think about the emotional safety. What are we doing to this space to help them, number one, walk through this door, and number two, take a risk to do something different. And I think back what Darda was saying, how do we reach all students? Because schools are the best place to do that. Thank you for participating in this. We just are using this as a mind-on to anchor our why, and we'll go straight into our presentation and just sharing more about our resource. Okay, thank you for that.
Awesome. Okay, thanks everyone for participating. Like Andrea said, it's nice to see lots of very similar words and positive words that you all generated on these sheets. I'm going to start with an overview for us today. So providing a bit of context, I see most of you are actually new faces. Or I guess maybe a couple familiar, but mostly new faces. So providing a bit of context to our work and why we're here. And what we've been doing in collaboration with the OPC. So over the past 2 years, Ophea and the OPC have been working together to support inclusive physical education and physical literacy programming for children and youth across Ontario. This work has resulted in numerous resources for educators and community activity providers. We've got a list on the slideshow on the board here. We have 6 main kind of outputs that have resulted from this work over the past 2 years. So number one, which we'll spend a decent portion of today chatting about, is our disability-centered movement resource. This is kind of our primary resource that was developed between 2021 and 2023. We also have our Disability at the Forefront live webinar that we hosted back in October of 2022, Andrea, yeah. We have our disability-centered movement e-learning module on our website as well. We also host disability-centered movement in-person and virtual workshops. We have our health and physical education activities that are currently in the final stages of development, focusing on universal design learning with connections to parasport and Special Olympic sports. And then lastly, we have capacity building tools for sport and community sport organizations on how to engage and work with schools in the form of our Working with Schools 101 mini series. So lots of work has gone on over the past 2 years, and we're going to go through all of this today. So that kind of brings us to this presentation and what Andrea and I will be speaking about for the next 40 minutes or so. So we will be discussing the education landscape a bit over recent years as it relates to inclusive and accessible physical and health education. We will be contextualizing the work that Ophea is doing in collaboration with the OPC. We'll be sharing the resources that have been developed over the past 2 years, what they are, how to access them, where to find them, things like that, how to use them. I'll be sharing high-level data and outcomes, including impact of this work on Ontario educators, and we'll outline what is currently underway and what's to come at Ophea in this space.
Okay. Where did we start? Back in 2010, we had a resource called Ophea Steps to Inclusion. And this resource was developed to support educators and also physical activity providers in overarching high-level strategies on how to create inclusive environments. Okay, there were many requests for this specific workshop in the education sector, where they were, school boards, schools were requesting workshops. Hey, we have phys ed teachers, we have generalist teachers. How do we teach students with disabilities? So there was a need, okay? We started delivering these workshops, and then we started realizing, hey, there are major gaps in this resource that we were created. Resources, and the gaps range from specifically, okay, I'm teaching a class of 30 students, 2 kids with disabilities, 1 with autism, 1 in a wheelchair. Where do I start, right? Understanding of the individual education plan. So many teachers, okay, I have this student, what does an IEP look like? Where do I start? Who do I go to in the school to ensure that this student is actually learning? Collaboration with parents, caregivers, educators, and even health professionals. Many educators didn't even know that they could access the different services in their school and school board. So there was a huge gap in this resource and not having that content available. And also the knowledge on how to personalize programming to ensure that the student, whether they need accommodations and or modifications, what does the teacher do? How do they read the curriculum, right? And this is what the students have to learn in order to personalize it for the particular student. And we're going back to that term, universal design. So when we talk about a space, how do we ensure that the physical education space is accessible for all of our learners with and without disabilities? And the knowledge on how to do that wasn't really there in this resource, okay? The requests kept coming in, and we'll move on to the next slide. What led to the next one is we decided to do a needs assessment, and I'll share it with Alex, and she can provide some context in regards to the why. So we gave you the what. I'll share the mic with you.
Yeah, for sure. So along with what Andrew was saying around identifying gaps in our kind of existing resources that we had at Ophea, and we also wanted to see what was needed in this space. So to better understand kind of the education landscape, more specifically the education landscape as it's related to inclusive and accessible health and phys ed, Ophea conducted a needs assessment in 2020. I'm not going to go into the details, but the needs assessment found that teachers, especially generalist elementary educators, so educators who don't have a background in health and phys ed, they're not kind of specific to health and phys ed, face significant challenges in delivering inclusive physical education programming. Teachers express difficulty in applying an inclusive and accessible lens to their physical education teaching, both from the perspective of meeting individualized needs, so student individual needs, and also from the perspective of universal design. So to support the needs assessment as well, we conducted a preliminary environmental scan to kind of see what's out there, what resources exist. And the scan found that there were very few teaching supports available specific to inclusive physical education. So knowing the gaps in the resources for educators and the needs for supports for educators in planning and implementing inclusive physical education programming came our first project with the OPC. So this first project started in November of 2021, so 2 years ago now, and wrapped up in April of 2023. This project was called the Inclusive Physical Education in Ontario Schools Project, a bit lengthy. We just shortened it to Inclusive PE. This project resulted in our disability-centered movement supporting inclusive physical education resource and accompanying resources that Andrew and I are going to go in depth into now. All right, so I'm going to start us off by chatting about our disability-centered movement resource, providing a bit of an overview. So as I just noted, the main output for this first project was our disability-centered movement resource. It launched in October of 2022, so just over a year ago now. This is a free resource available to support educators in designing a physical education program for students with disabilities and approaches for physical activity providers to engage students with disabilities in enriching experiences to develop their physical skills. This resource includes essential foundational information for educators to plan a physical education program that meets students' individualized needs, as well as provide strategies and approaches for universal design. So I'm just going to go over at a high level what this resource includes, and Andrew's going to dive a bit deeper into the details of those different sections of the resource and also provide some examples of what she's done in her classroom and what that looks like. So we have 5 main sections. Our first section is called Where to Start. And this includes accommodation ideas by disability grouping to provide educators with starting points. Andrew's going to talk a little bit more about the details of like who we worked with, how we came up with these groupings, how we came up with these accommodations. Our second main section is understanding the individualized education plan process. So Andrea had just mentioned an individualized education plan, or what's called an IEP. If you're in the education space, you might know what an IEP is. If you're not, an individual education plan is a personalized curriculum for students with an identified disability. At a high level, that's what it is. This section includes scenario examples with curriculum expectations, sample ideas on accommodations, modifications, and alternative expectations, what all of that could look like for students to provide educators with examples and samples. Third, we have our program planning in various settings section. So this section provides prompts for educators to think about what setting may be best for their students with disabilities. Andrea will chat a little bit about what those settings look like, what some of those prompts might be to think about what setting might be best for your students. Fourth, we have our program planning outside of the classroom. So this includes examples of physical activity approaches in community or extracurricular scenarios. So this could be school intramurals, this could be community camps or clubs. And then lastly, we do have a pretty extensive glossary with over 30 terms that are used within the education and disability space that educators may not fully understand or maybe don't know. So this glossary is here for extra support to help with knowledge and understanding.
Okay. Before I start, I really wanted to share that I want to make this personable for you and why you're in this room, because I want to make sure that you get the content you need so that you can bring it back to your organization or the school communities you work with. So we have a few educators in the room, organizations who do physical activity. Raise your hand. Yeah, awesome. Any other sectors? Yourself? Sport organization. Okay. Coaching. Awesome. So I'm going to take you through a tour of each of the 4 sections. And the reason why I'm doing that is whether you are a teacher or a sport organization, it's really important to understand how the education sector works. Because when you are going into schools or working with schools or trying to get your program or sport into the school, understanding the language and what students have to do during curriculum time to meet those curriculum expectations is really valuable to, number one, get your foot in the door, but also number 2, understanding how these students learn and how you can align what you're doing as an organization to what teachers have to do in the school space, okay? Where do I start? So as Alex was saying, this section provides educators with information on, okay, like she said, we have in the elementary panel is majority generalist teachers. So when I say generalist teachers, these teachers are responsible for 7 to 8 subjects for the whole year. And majority of the time, they don't have the experience or the background knowledge on how to teach health and phys ed. So for example, I might be a grade 6 teacher. I have 2 kids integrated into my class who have disabilities. Oh my goodness, where do I start? So in this section was created to support those teachers at the initial point when they are unsure of how to support the student with the specific disability, the knowledge and understanding of what the disability is. What's lovely about this section is that this section was co-created with numerous organizations. Most of them were actually in the room this morning to ensure that the language was aligned with the disability sector, but also aligning the language to what curriculum looks, sounds, and feels like for teachers in Ontario. As Alex was saying, for each of the disability groupings, we also have accommodations. So when students come to me and I'm teaching them, it is my legal role to ensure that they reach the curriculum expectations. So we need to make sure that we accommodate them to actually be able to achieve those expectations. So those are all there for the disability groupings. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And then we also have community organizations in Ontario. So if I was teaching, for example, 3 students with autism, they obviously look, sound, and feel very differently when they come into the phys ed space. But I have their IEPs, their individual education plans already set up, but I want to connect them to an outside organization in the community. Those are all listed on this section of the website too, okay? So this is what it looks like on the landing page. There are 7 disability groupings, okay? These disability groupings have been organized, as you can see, for example, students who are in wheelchair users, students who are blind and low vision, students with cognitive disability, etc. I'm not going to go into detail. When you click each of them, what you'll see is number one, a description of what that might look like in your phys ed classroom. So again, if you're a sport organization or community organization in the room right now, this is a really good start to have your staff go through if you happen to have a participant or a student in your program who has a disability, and you need to have some accommodations in the back pocket to be able to have them access and participate fully in your program. Number two, we also have examples of what this disability grouping can look like. So for example, in the first one, students ambulating independently or with an assistive device. They could be in a power wheelchair, they could be in a pediatric wheelchair, they can even be in a walker, and what those accommodations can look like in the phys ed or physical activity space, okay? That's about it for this section. Any questions with this one? Okay. So this is what it looks like in my classroom. Before I go into it, my school, elementary, K-8, we have a community class. So in York Region, community classes are designated classes that are self-contained with 6 to 10 students with disabilities. So they are learning within their peer group, various disabilities ranging from multiple exceptionalities, cognitive disabilities, physical disabilities, and they have different points in the day where they integrate for different subjects. Phys ed is one of the main ones. I was very lucky to be in a school with a very supportive administration where the community class had 4 phys ed periods a week, where they would have their individual self-contained phys ed class along with an integrated class where they would come to me and learn alongside peers their age, and also reverse integration, where we were able to pull out students and peers their age from their regular class during the day. They would come down in the gymnasium in a smaller group approach where they would learn together alongside. So I took just a few pictures just to show you that these are accommodations from this resource and things that I've applied in my own classroom, such as visuals, using a token system, using different types of rewards just to be able to support behavior management. Let's just say a student has a really challenging time even walking to the gymnasium for phys ed. What can that look like? Okay. When we think about environmental accommodations, many of you have listed that on your chart papers. What is in your physical space that can support that student? This over here is really neat. We have a community corner. And this is a corner that supports, I actually created it specifically for the community class, which is comprised of 6 students who are autistic. They had lots of sensory needs in regards to touch and tight squeezes. I co-created that space with the special education resource teacher. And what I noticed is when I created that space, they were able to enter and exit whenever they want. That was all pre-taught by their homeroom teacher. Then the other students in the class were like, hey, what is that space? Can we use it? And then in my head, I was like, why not, right? So we had to teach that as a whole group. We had to teach etiquette, how to enter and exit that space and when to use it. And this actually became one of the needed spaces in my gymnasium for phys ed, because sometimes students aren't really loving the class at that moment in time, and they needed to be able to exit it, but also be able to re-enter into the class. So that was, that's also in this resource too, to support that accommodation. Assessment. So when we think about assessment, we really want to make sure as teachers, we are able to capture that learning at that age and stage of time for the student. So what does that meeting the curriculum expectation look, sound, and feel like? I do a lot of centers in my classroom. This is one of the examples of assessment accommodations in this resource. These 4 pictures at the bottom are taken from my movement exploration unit, where students are able to demonstrate their learning in a variety of ways. Let me see what else. Yeah, that's about it from accommodations. Okay, section 2, IEPs, individual education plan. So if you're not in the teaching world, this is like, I'm gonna put my mom hat on, my weapon of choice. So in order to have teachers be accountable for what they teach, specifically students with disabilities, students with an identified disability that Alex was saying have an individual education plan. So if students can't meet the expectation in the Ontario Health and Phys Ed curriculum because of their disability, they have this Bible, and this Bible has different program pages for every subject. What does that look like? So when we were doing an environmental scan, there's nothing out there in the market that supports educators in this area. And many of the times, if you go back in the school communities you're in, many times these students don't even have a phys ed program page in their IEP. So if I put my mom hat on and I say, okay, Bella's going into your phys ed class, where's her phys ed program page? What is she learning? Oh, she just comes in here for social. That ain't happening, right? Teachers are responsible for the safety and the learning of the student. So in this section, I'm not going to read it. It provides it contextualizes where to start, where do I go for the teachers so that they can program plan with intention for the student. Very quickly, this is what it looks like on the landing page. We also asked our educators when we were doing our contributors or reviewing, they wanted examples. What does that look like? I'm a general teacher. I never written an IEP before. How do I modify program goals to meet my learners' needs? So we have primary, junior, intermediate, and also senior at the secondary level of what those examples can look like. So you can explore that on your own time. We love this one. This implementation framework aligns with many of our Ontario ministry documents, but it's specifically written from a phys ed lens. So it walks the teacher through all the different steps, and it's cyclical, right? On gathering information about the student, setting the direction, creating those program goals, trying those program goals. It's gonna fail, right? Sometimes if it fails, what do I do? So we talk about the green gear, reviewing and updating the IEP. So really holding that teacher's hand on understanding what to do from beginning to end and ensuring that IEP, that phys ed program page is personalized, that Bible, that key to success to have that student be successful in the phys ed curriculum. Okay. Setting. So as I said, in my school, I was very lucky to be able to offer the self-contained, integrated, and reverse integrations setting. Sometimes that might not be realistic for all of our learners. I think of September, right? That's a very challenging time for our students with disabilities who might be transferring into a new environment. Maybe some of them have had no experience or negative experiences in the gymnasium, right? So this section is really nice because it walks the educators through what the 3 settings can look like, but it also talks about what it is, the benefits, and also questions to ask yourself of deciding, hey, which setting is best for my student, why, and things that I can ask myself to decide. So maybe September to November, they should be in their self-contained setting just to get the rules and routines in. And maybe by term 2, let's revisit. Maybe they can start integration, maybe 20 minutes at a time. So this section walks the user through all of that. And these are just some pictures of what this looks like in my own classroom. So that's Laura. She's the special education resource teacher at my school, teaching the self-contained class. Many EAs in that class, educational assistants. Integrated setting. So this is where students with disabilities are integrated with peers their age. What does that look like? How do you navigate that? All of that in that section of the resource. And reverse integration. So I'm very lucky to work in a school where other teachers want to work with teachers who are teaching students with disabilities. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, right? So this resource can walk you through the intricacies and the gray area of how to navigate that. These are just some pictures of what that looks like and how I built that program at my school. Okay, 4 sections. So this might pertain to those of you who are in the room who are organizations supporting physical activity in a community setting. So as Alex was saying that it has a description of what that could look like, whether you're offering a programming just for students or participants with disabilities, or an integrated setting where you have participants with and without disabilities. We have case scenarios there, what that can look like in an intramural setting or even after school or outside the school community setting. Okay. Okay. Any questions with the resource itself? That was a lot in the last 8 minutes, I'm sure. Oh, okay. Okay, so that was one of the outputs that we did. Alex did explain it very briefly. To launch our disability-centered movement resource, we had a Q&A power panel, and this was a live power panel. Oh yeah, there we go. this is one of the outputs that we had to launch this resource. This was offered in 2022, just over a year ago. We wanted to make this resource meaningful for our teachers. So what we did was we opened up the panel registration, the registration. Teachers were able to provide their questions to us, and we tailored the whole webinar to what the questions were. We had Jennifer Kill, who's a secondary health and phys ed teacher, Anika Porter, who's a child and youth worker at the elementary and secondary level, my colleague Laura Seckington, who is a special education resource teacher, Jake Udeball, who is a youth advocate who identifies as someone with a disability. And they were able to ask questions in a live manner, and I was moderating, and it was just really nice to be able to, number one, hear the realities of in schools today, and number two, be able to provide answers and have this resource be able to support these teachers in real life. Another output that we had from this resource was a blog recap. So all of this will provide to you in a participant's handout and a QR code. Every time we have a webinar, we have a blog recap, and you can actually see the webinar on our YouTube link. Okay. Another output that we had was we created the e-learning module last school year. So this e-learning module is to be supporting teachers in providing information and context on how to use our resource, but also supporting them with the content on how to teach students with disabilities in the different settings. We recognize in our education sector, not many organizations may have the money to purchase a fee for service from Ophea for me to deliver a workshop, for example. So this e-learning module is free to access. Participants from Faculty of Educations have used this before. They would also get a certificate for going through this e-learning module. So if you are a staff member coming from a school community, or you're working with training coaches, this is something that you can provide them for free as training or some background knowledge to enrich their understanding on how to work with participants with disabilities. Okay, this is my fun part of my job, delivering workshops. So bringing this resource in real life. So Ophea, we keep getting many requests for this workshop. This is actually our most requested workshop out of our menu. We've been very lucky to be able to attend many conferences such as this across Canada to share our resource and also show participants how to use our resource. We've been reaching elementary and secondary educators. We've had a lot of pleasure being able to support staff. We've worked with all of the support staff in TDSB, I think also the Limestone District School Board. We've also worked with PT and OTs, occupational and physiotherapy departments from different school boards too. A lot of these sectors have PA days, professional learning days, where they would say, hey, Ophea, do you have a workshop? Can you customize it to meet our participants' needs? We can do that. Kinesiology undergraduate programs, being able to support those partnerships over there, Faculty of Educations, community partnerships, provincial and national conferences that I shared, and learning labs. So I'll talk more about learning labs at the end of this session. In a nutshell, that was it. Oh, usage data. Okay, that's you.
Yep, awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Andrea. That was a lot of content thrown at everyone. Does anyone have any questions about anything in particular that Andrea shared, any pieces of the resource, or if anyone has seen the resource? Any questions or anything like that before I go into usage and uptake and outcomes? Awesome. Okay, so I want to share some high-level data and outcomes of this work that we've been doing. So I'll start with data related to the uptake among Ontario educators. So our disability-centered movement resource, as in noted, it launched in October of 2022. So October 17th was the launch date. Between October 17th, 2022 and October 17th, 2023, so one full year, we've had almost 70,000 views in English, which is a lot for us and our resources. I'm very happy with all of the uptake and views that this resource has received, and it kind of proves that Ontario educators are obviously interested in this and need this resource like this. That's okay. We've also had because we support all of Ontario schools, we have all of our resources in English and French. We typically get less for French because there are fewer French educators and teachers, but we've had over 1,700 views of our French resource as well. For our Q&A power panel, so the live webinar that Andrea shared, we had 192 registrants, and of those 192, we had 116 attendees, which for us is really, really great. It's one of our most attended webinars that we've hosted, aside from some of our kind of COVID-19 webinars that you could assume doing online stuff was a lot more was needed at that time. So a lot of people attended this webinar, a lot of interest in this webinar, which was really great to see. And then lastly, we have our disability-centered movement e-learning module. And so this e-learning module was launched in this past April 2023. So it hasn't been around as long as our webinar, or sorry, our resource. So for this school year, which is from August 2023 up until I think it was maybe the end of October, we've had 283 completions in English and 60 completions in French so far over the past 3 months or so, which is also really great for us. So lots of uptake, which is really, really great to see. Hopefully a lot of learning and education that's happening with our Ontario educators. So along with our uptake, I want to quickly share what we've heard from educators as it relates to the impact of this work. So this is very high level, but this past spring, we sent out an impact survey to a sample of educators. The survey was to kind of get a glimpse into the impact and anticipated impact of our disability-centered movement resource and the e-learning module. Overall, the results were very, very positive. We asked about a number of different things, but I've highlighted a few on the screen here as it kind of relates to our main objectives and goals of that work. So of kind of the questions that we asked, 100% of the respondents of our educators agreed, so either strongly agreed or agreed, that the resource includes content that will, number one, increase educator confidence in planning and using accommodations and modifications within a physical education setting. Number two, increase knowledge and understanding amongst most educators of universal design. Number three, increase educator confidence in applying strategies, accommodations, and modifications to help meet students' individualized needs. And number four, increase educator capacity and confidence in developing a physical education program page in the IEP. So if you kind of remember back to what Andrea was saying about the gaps of our initial kind of older resource, we're hitting a lot of those gaps with this resource and what we've seen in terms of the outcome and impact on educators, which is really great to see because that's what we kind of set out to do with this resource. I'm going to pass over to Andrea. She's going to talk a little bit about the in-person virtual workshops and the impact and outcome of those workshops.
So when I go out to do the workshops, this one specifically, these are the nuggets that I address in the workshop. It's basically bringing this resource in live, showing them what it looks like in real life and giving them the how, right? The what, they can just go onto the website, but I'm actually taking them through the 3-part lesson, showing them how to modify and accommodate on the spot and how to walk them through developing those physical education program pages. Like Alex was saying, educators have responded with very positive feedback. They love the interactive component. They love the hands-on activities that I am providing, but there's a lot of work to do. I'll give you a perfect example. I was in the Halton District School Board last school year. There was an attendee after the workshop came up to me and they're like, oh, hey, Andrea, we love your workshop. I had a lot of fun. I'm currently teaching the leadership course right now, but I have a student who is in grade 12 who is integrated into my class. Do you have any autistic games? And I was like, oh, okay, how should I answer this? I'm wearing my Ophea shirt right now. So although we have a lot of this is a big resource. There's a lot of mindset, like Darda was saying this morning, that needs to shift, and it takes time. And we know that many educators may mean well, but that inclusive mindset, that inclusion lens is not always there, right? So we do recognize that. We are continuing our work in the disability sector, also bridging the gaps in the education sector. And we're hoping that you attending this workshop can also spread the word that we're very open to partnering and also working with you to support the needs that you have and also learning from you too. Okay. Okay, that's you.
Awesome. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I do believe we are like maybe 10-ish minutes. So we're gonna try to kind of walk through the rest of this quite quickly. But that was kind of all of our project one. So a lot that's gone on between kind of November of 2021 and April of 2023. And that brings us to our second project with the OPC, which has been taking place this year. So this is the OPC Legacy Project, Connecting the Dots. This was initiated in March of 2023, wrapping up at the end of this year, so kind of in the upcoming weeks. I want to provide a bit of background information on why this project was initiated, what the goals and objectives are of this work, and then we're going to talk about what's being developed and what will be available shortly for educators and activity providers. So since March, Ophea and the OPC have been working on our second project, the OPC Legacy Project. So as the OPC sunsets at the end of this year, establishing direct pathways, or what we're calling connecting the dots between school-based physical activity initiatives and community parasport, is an important legacy of this collective work. So building upon the work that we've been doing in collaboration with the OPC to date, the OPC Legacy Project will utilize health and phys ed as a pathway for creating inclusive activity environments where every student can participate and introduce parasport activities and community opportunities. So the goals and objectives of this work includes, number one, among Ontario educators, increased awareness of opportunities for student participation in parasport and Special Olympic sport activities inside and outside of HMPE. And secondly, among OPC partners and sport organizations, community sport organizations, disability sport organizations, increased understanding of the role of community sport leaders in Ontario, the Ontario education system, and an increased capacity to work with schools. So essentially, what this work is intended to do, kind of in a nutshell, is connect educators and students with community sport organizations and opportunities like parasports, like Special Olympic sports, and then also make that connection and connect community sport organizations with educators and schools, so that ultimately, similar to what the theme of this morning has been and what Dara was saying, more children and youth, especially those with disabilities, can take part in sport and physical activity opportunities that exist in their community. So we're really trying to kind of bridge those two together. Okay, I'll talk at a high level what our outputs are, or what we're in the process of developing, and then Andrew will go a little bit deeper into it. So at a high level, we have two main outputs. We've got number one, to kind of address that educator kind of goal and objective. We have activity cards. So these are activity cards for educators. They are developed using, they're developed to be used in a variety of settings. So this could be physical and health education class in the curriculum. It could be extracurricular, such as intramurals. And within these, we directly reference parasports and Special Olympic sports to increase awareness and knowledge among both educators and students. So we're trying to kind of make that connection there. Secondly, our second output is kind of addressing the OPC capacity and building capacity of OPC members and organizations. And this is our Working with Schools 101 mini series. So this is a capacity building tool for sport organizations. It's a 3-episode mini series with various panelists on connecting and working with schools. So trying to kind of answer some of those common, or talk about some of those common questions that sport organizations might have when it comes to connecting and building relationships with schools. I'm going to pass over to Andrea. She's going to dive a little bit deeper into both of those.
So the activity cards that Alex was saying, I'll describe why an educator or a physical activity provider will use it. So many times, someone in my workshop, a teacher specifically, might say, okay, I love what you do, Andrea. How do I do it? How do I talk about disability in the phys ed setting? How do I talk about disability in a community setting, but also be able to provide games in a meaningful way that meets the curriculum expectations, or also be able to give them meaningful physical activity at the same time. So these activity cards were designed with 2 approaches. Number one, a universal design approach, that language that I was talking about at the beginning of this session. So how does a teacher create a 3-part lesson or an activity so that all of the learners with and without disabilities have an entry point? So that's the first approach. And the second one, the teaching games for understanding. So this is a model of teaching for phys ed, where we're teaching skills, concepts, and strategies through games. So we're not doing drill and kill, but we're really trying to do those mini games formats so that students can actually learn, play, and also have fun at the same time. I'm not gonna read the three things on the slide. These are the, I guess, the learning goals or the objectives of the activity cards. But stay tuned with Ophea. We'll give you our website at the end just so that you can stay tuned of when these activity cards will be launched. Again, like Alex was saying, they can be used across the different settings when during phys ed and also outside of phys ed, such as intramurals. Okay, the mini series. So if you are an organization in the room and you're saying, how do I get into schools? How do I stay in schools? Or I'm a company and I provide physical activity. How do I get my foot in the door to provide meaningful opportunities for students to be active? So we all know that community partners are great partners in education to support students, families, and caregivers in accessing physical activity outside of the community, right? Really taking what the students are learning in my class outside of the curriculum time. So we're hoping that the Working with Schools 101 mini series really enhance the capacity of organizations to connect with schools. So there's 3 episodes: Getting Started, Entry Points, and Logistics. We have 2 educators from Ontario talking with me, just sharing their strategies on how they work with organizations and what do they look for in terms of aligning health and phys ed and the organization's mandates and visions that are coming in. Second episode, What's Working, Hearing from Organizations. So thanks to OPC, we were able to connect with Daniel, who is a community events manager at Parasport Ontario, also working with Rugby Canada, Ryan Jones. They're sharing their experience in terms of working with schools and school boards on how to get into schools and what's worked, and also the challenges that they've had. And episode 3, we talk with 2 system leaders in regards to what do they look for as an administrator and also a system level consultant on how they vet and how they get organizations to come into their schools that they oversee. So stay tuned again, more information on it.
All right, okay, we are wrapping up very shortly, I promise. So as we noted, this work is still underway. So our Working with Schools 101 mini-series, our activities, we're in the final stages of kind of developing those, and those should be ready fairly soon. So I want to just outline where and when these new resources will be available, if you would like to access them. So our activity cards will be available on Ophea's website, which is ophea.net. These will be launching at the end of November. So very shortly, these will be available for educators if you are in the education space. Our Working with Schools 101 mini-series will be available on the Parasport Ontario Resource Hub, so parasportontario.ca. So you can kind of keep your eye out there to see when, and I'm sure that something might be shared when they are launched. So keep an eye out or an ear out for when that is launched on parasportontario.ca.
Okay. Learning labs. So this is something very new Ophea is doing this year. I'm currently working with York University, their kinesiology department, on bringing our disability-centered movement resource to life in the kinesiology world. So Learning Labs is a custom request where an organization such as yours, school board, or even an individual school might say, hey, Andrea, we have this need, we have this staff, we have these group of people who we want to offer program planning or education for students with disabilities. Where do I start? So I come in, I work with the host to streamline this resource to meet your needs, your organization's needs. These are just some pictures from last week. I'm at York University a total of 5 times, working with the course instructor, their kinesiology students, to teach them how to work with people with disabilities. What's lovely is that they have a feeder high school where they have students with disabilities who are coming to York University for 3 sessions. And it's hands-on experience where I work with them to co-plan physical activity programs on how to work with people with disabilities. We actually just got a request 2 days ago from a school in my board where the administration wants to have all the staff understand how to teach students with disabilities in phys ed class. So again, another Learning Lab customization where I'm coming in to tailor this resource to meet their school staff's needs. Yeah, so that's it about Learning Labs. If this is something of your interest, feel free to reach out to Alex or myself. Okay, so our participant handout. So Alex and I curated a bunch of resources, our resource, disability-centered resource, our e-learning module, and a bunch of other videos and projects that have launched last year are all on the participant handout. The bit.ly link is at the top. Over to you to the summit session feedback.